It's the Beaver Banter podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner. My co-host is Ian Rivers, and we're joined by Lucas of Beaver Territory as well. We'll get to him in a second, but first, Ian, just want to touch on a couple spring sports that are some are good, some are bad. Let's start off with the good.
All right, the good. Let's start with men's golf. They competed this Monday and today in the Natural State Golf Classic, taking 5th of 11th yesterday and 4th of 11th earlier today. So a decent result for them. That's pretty par for what we've seen for them so far this year. Their next competition will be the NSIC Championships. That is this coming weekend, Friday through Sunday. And then the other thing I had on my docket to talk about was softball, who's played 6 games since we last talked about them, including a sweep, or getting swept by Mankato State, Minnesota State Mankato, that is, and a couple of pretty ugly games. And now they're on a 4-game win streak. Yesterday, sweeping Concordia St. Paul, and today taking both games against Mary. So that brings their in-conference record up to, I believe, 7-7. Let's check the standings page. Yes, 7-7 in conference. That is good for 9th place in the NSIC. So with just 10 games to go in the season, they are currently sitting in the NSIC tournament field. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, and we talked about it with softball. They have a chance to really kind of get on track and have a nice little season for themselves. They're able to do that. Of course, men's golf has been doing what they've been doing all year long, slowly turning Bemidji State into a golf school, I think.
Yep.
So, and then of course, might have missed it. Did you mention track and field with
I did not. So we had a couple of people break program records this week. Let's see if I can find their names here. Mary Goodwin and Lexi Erickson both set program records, and I believe it was Goodwin. What did she break? I'm not sure I can find what record she set, but both of those ladies setting program records for the Beavers for sure. And if I can find it, I'll bring it up.
I got the link up here somewhere. I'm going to try and pull it up to make sure by the way, full disclosure, track and field, I have no idea. My brother runs track right now in high school, and I've consistently gotten what events he's in wrong multiple times. I know nothing about the intricacies of track and field, but according to the Bemidji Pioneer, they talk a little bit about the program best that Mary Goodwin and Lexi Erickson each set program best in California. Goodwin ran the 3,000 meter race in 10:57.96. And then they topped the previous school. Erickson finished, by the way, with 17th in a crowded field with a time of 4:38.65. As well, just some of the records that they mentioned them setting in that. But lastly, with the bad, let's get to the bad here. Ian, baseball, man, Bemidji State baseball finally gets to play in Bemidji, or at least have gotten close to that, and they go to Crookston and just get the brakes beaten off them, 23-3. Now, for the record, they are facing the Dykoff brothers for Crookston, who are a really good baseball family. Jake Dykoff on the mound for Crookston, and outside of a 2-run home run, pretty much threw the lights out in that game. And Crookston's a good baseball school, man. They're 15-6 in the conference, 25-14, and they certainly showed it. As I'm just taking a look at the box score here for Minnesota Crookston, it's there's just, I could read you the whole list, but we'd be here all day. Like it's just the baseball season continues for the Beavers. They're 2-34. They're 1-20 in the NSIC. I don't think we need to delve too much more. We don't need to delve too much more into that.
I'll give a quick shout out to my hometown of Maple Lake, Minnesota. Ben Geltz is an outfielder on that Crookston team that just gave the business to Bemidji this week. He's from Maple Lake and was one of my brother's best friends in high school. So I've spent quite a few days out on the boat with him.
All right, I'll give a shout out to Wadena Deer Creek, which is the school that's just up the road from where I live, and it's the city I work in. Wadena, that is, and the radio station I've covered. Jake's younger brother Josh, who's a freshman on this Crookston team, who's also really, really good in high school. By the way, this is a side tangent. In high school, in the section tournament down in St. Cloud, he hit for the cycle and capped it off by hitting a go-ahead grand slam in the 7th inning. So they're a pretty good baseball family. Believe the older brother, the older Dykoff brother, was a couple years younger than me, and my high school team upset them in the playoffs. That was a really good win, but nobody cares about that. But let's move on from baseball for a second here, and let's join Lucas into the program. Lucas of Beaver Territory has been a friend of the podcast throughout the season as we've talked Beaver hockey. And now that the hockey season is in the books, we felt it right to bring Lucas on to talk about his thoughts on the hockey season. So Lucas, great to have you back on the podcast. How's it going, man? And just give us your thoughts on Bemidji State hockey as a whole.
Going good. I appreciate you guys having me on again. Season obviously ended now over a month ago. It's been good to kind of reflect back on what happened this year and where things went wrong, where we're going. You're in a situation to start last year where you had lost, 70% of your scoring from the year before. And I think my expectations going into the season were fairly low, and we finished 5th in the conference, which is right around where I think we should have finished. Losing to a good Northern Michigan team in that first round that ended up going on a run to the conference or the conference final. It wasn't a fun season of Beaver hockey, but there's plenty of positives to look forward to.
Yeah, so Lucas, just with this season, like you said, Bemidji State was expected to finish 4th or 5th in the conference, and that's ultimately where they ended up being. Do you see this as just kind of not a lost year because the expectations weren't super high, but do you see this as a year that they got some much needed experience, or do you see it as a year where it's like, I don't know, man, they have to hit reset next year?
No, I think you saw some good positives. You had a bunch of freshmen playing. You had 4 freshman defensemen kind of rotating through the 6th and 7th spots on the roster. You had at least 3 freshman forwards contributing in meaningful ways. You're graduating a lot of players. You're going to be looking at 9 departures from last season going and 9 incoming freshmen. It's going to be a young team again next year, but the guys that you have do have some pretty good experience, and you have got freshmen coming in that are ready to step into the lineup right away, I think.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things, and something that I find pretty incredible, just given the landscape that college athletics has become, is nobody has left Bemidji State in the transfer portal. I guess knock on wood, because I don't believe it's closed yet. But I think that's something to hold your hat on for next year. Getting these guys some cohesion. That's something that they kind of lacked coming into this year, with a couple transfers coming in and a lot of, like you said, a lot of offensive firepower leaving. And that'll be good to get some of these guys who've played together, and it makes a difference. It really does. When you know exactly what your teammates are going to do on what play, because now you've played with them for an entire season, you've practiced with them for an entire extra year. It's a big thing. So I think my main concern is defensively. Obviously, Smolek, Rosen, and Loft are gone. What are you looking at in that defensive core next year? Who's going to step up?
Yeah, you have 2 juniors that are still on the team, and Tony Fulmer and Will Magnuson, that both played pretty much every game last year. You're looking at those 4 freshmen again. Patrick Sadosari, Logan Atchison, Mitchell Wolf, Vince Corcoran. They all rotated through on that 3rd defensive pairing. You also have one of the highest touted prospects coming in to Bemidji State next year, in Eric Polkamp, who's currently leading the USHL in scoring among defensemen. You also have Gustav Ozilic coming in as a freshman who played in the World Juniors for Latvia. Pretty highly touted prospect in his own right. He's been dealing with some injuries these last couple of years. But you have guys that can step into those roles that Rosen, Smolek, and Loft had. And part of the reason, those 3 took up so many minutes last year, and deservingly so. They're really, really good players. But you have guys that I think can fill those roles without too much issue. And looking at the transfer portal too, you kind of mentioned, no players having left through the transfer portal. But Bemidji State's one of 3 programs in Division I hockey that haven't had a departure in the transfer portal yet this year.
Wow.
Alaska, Anchorage, Merrimack, and Bemidji State are the only 3.
And, that's important for today's college hockey, especially. You saw a program just in southern Minnesota in Mankato that just got gashed and or at least lost some
There's
parts.
there's a lot more that goes into that one than just players leaving. I mean, when the
Yeah.
coach goes, a lot of the players are probably going to follow. But yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So
Yeah,
I
they had
mean,
a lot of early departures too. I mean, if you look at Minnesota State, they're going to be losing 71% of their scoring, I believe, from a year ago. That's crazy.
so just how does that? I mean, obviously, just like you said, bringing back that familiarity. How does that change at all? And especially with some of the other programs across the CCHA, does that change your outlook? Does that brighten your outlook on next year's Beavers team?
I think so. I think it speaks to a lot of the, about the culture that Coach Territory and the staff have developed here at Bemidji State. It's a program that, and part of it too is, they're not really bringing in players to the transfer portal. It's going to be like Ian said, a familiar cast. You're going to be used to the players that you're playing with, and you're going to get the minutes that you were promised during your recruiting process. So it's going to be, a good way to develop cohesion is keeping the players that you've recruited all 4 years, of their college experience here.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, you look at a bigger program like Minnesota just had. Rhett Stodiker, he's entered his name in the transfer portal. He's been a senior. He was a senior this year. He's forced a redshirt because Minnesota brought in too many guys, forced him out of the rotation, and he's been a guy that's played many, many minutes for them. And I think that's something, like you said, that just breeds confidence in recruits that says, hey, this guy's going to keep his promise to me, that, maybe my freshman year we'll see 10, 14 games. But then by the time I'm a sophomore, I'm in there as a top 6 defenseman or forward or whatever it's going to be.
And you look at the other freshmen in the CCHA. I mean, you have, from St. Thomas, you have Josh Ernestine in the portal now. You have Joey Larson, who moved from Northern Michigan to Michigan State. You have Simon Tassi and Christian Fitzgerald, like you had kind of mentioned before, leaving Minnesota State and going to Wisconsin. So, I mean, it's impressive that you're able to keep these underclassmen happy and in your program.
I was surprised because Celia went to Wisconsin too, didn't he? I was surprised that many of them were able to follow him there. I get that Wisconsin's going to have some players transfer out, and they have. I've seen since those 3 have committed, but I was surprised that many players were able to follow him to Wisconsin.
Yeah, they've had a couple of notable decommitments too with Aiden Fink, who's a leading scorer and the MVP of the Alberta Junior Hockey League. He just went to Penn State now, or committed to Penn State. Yeah, there's going to be some fallout from that.
And to see the college hockey landscape shift a little bit, obviously the Big Ten has been building into one of the premier hockey conferences in the country now. If Wisconsin can get itself going, I know Michigan State was a team that some people were talking about as kind of being on the upswing as well. Obviously the NCHC has kind of tried to take that mantle as one of the better hockey conferences in the country. But what is a Big Ten really kind of flexing its muscle? How does that change the college hockey landscape?
Yeah, I kind of think last year was a little bit of an anomaly. I mean, they had a lot of success in the NCAA tournament. You look back 2 years ago though, and that wasn't the case. A lot of these transfers though, I mean, the one thing with the transfer portal is it's giving the Big Ten and those bigger schools the ability to plug holes, immediately. They don't have to sit there and develop recruits that they've brought in. If they have early departures, they're able to go out to the portal and pick up established players and plug them into the lineup right away.
I mean, look at what Michigan State just did. They had a pretty good season for all intents and purposes. Since 2007 when they won that national championship, they haven't had much success in the postseason, and they just had one of their best seasons in the last 10 for sure. And they go out and get 2 stellar guys for sure in Red Savage from Miami and Joey Larson from Northern Michigan, 2 teams that weren't able to make the postseason last year that had phenomenal years. So I think that it's a very big benefit for bigger schools like that, like you said, that can just say, hey, look, you're going to be a top 6 guy here. We just had a couple players leave. We need more scoring. Come on in. But I think that it does go both ways. It's a lot harder for schools in the CCHA to use it. It's a different type of utilization of the transfer portal. And if you're Bemidji State like this year, you don't even have to worry about it. You're building your program through recruiting alone, at least this season. And whenever they find a necessary transfer, they'll probably swing at it. We saw a couple of guys come in this season, and I'm sure that it's not the last time we will see it. So
Yeah, I agree. And there are some programs within the CCHA utilizing the transfer portal and kind of doing what the Bemidji State did last year. You have holes in your lineup that you need to fill. You have certain roles that you want to find, players that fit. I think the biggest one right now is Jack Perbix, just committed to Northern Michigan out of the transfer portal. He was at Western Michigan and I think Minnesota before
he was,
that.
yep.
Yeah. So that's a pretty big name going there. Michigan Tech's landed a couple of guys with 3 years of eligibility remaining. And then, Mankato's trying to rebuild too a little bit with their team. They just landed Jordan Power out of Clarkson, who's a experienced defenseman that'll be able to play for them right away.
And Austin Swankler is coming back for another year at Bowling Green. So the top half of the conference for sure is going to be reloading and ready to go for next season. I don't know that I'm ready to predict anything yet, but it's so hard to think that Minnesota State's going to just have this massive fall from grace and they're going to finish sixth in the conference. Maybe they will, but it's kind of like I talked about last week. I'm not going to say that until I actually watch it happen.
Yeah, and with Minnesota State, you have to wait a little bit more, I think, and see kind of what happens with some of the recruits that had committed to the previous regime, and see what ends up happening with them. I know it sounded like Aaron Pionk might have decommitted from Mankato. He's a big name defenseman from the USHL, but they still have plenty of talent coming in and plenty of talent on that roster.
Does Pionk have any relation to Neil?
Yep, brother.
Okay, good. I'm sure he's a stand-up guy.
Exactly. And then, Hermantown guy, you could see him going back to UMD. I wouldn't be surprised by that.
So taking a look at Bemidji State's, going back to kind of looking at last season, Lucas, what would you say was kind of your top moment for Bemidji State? What would you say is kind of your least top moment? Is it that series in St. Cloud for your top moment? Is it another game down the line, for your low point? Is it anytime they played Ferris State? What's your outlook on that season?
Man, I think the biggest moment probably was that St. Cloud home game. I mean, that was a game that they completely dominated, a top 5 team. I think St. Cloud might have been ranked number 2 in the nation at that point.
They were number 2.
Just controlled that game from start to finish. I think only gave up like 17 shots total. It was a 3-1 victory. That was early on in the season. We had just come off taking 5 points against Michigan Tech the weekend before. Things really looked to be on the up and up in that first half of that season. Low point, I'm going to go back to this Lake Superior State overtime where they had the power play up 2-1, give up a shorthanded goal, and then give up the goal in overtime to lose it.
Yeah, if you want to separate high and low points, let's see if I can find the exact date. December 16th would have been the end of the high point, and December 17th would have started the beginning of the low point, basically. The sweep in Mankato was probably one of my favorite moments. Just being able to go in there, and I get that that's kind of, it's almost like that series flipped the momentum for each team, which is weird because we started playing how they were playing in the first half, which was not up to their standards. And then they got really hot and, of course, won their 6th straight McNaughton Cup in the second half. So, but it was still, that was very fun being able to watch them close those games out and get the first sweep in Mankato since 2006, I believe it was, or something like that.
That sounds right, yeah.
So Lucas, what would you say with next year's team as we start to look in the familiarity and how this team is going to be? What's the way too early expectation for Bemidji State hockey, and just what are a couple areas where this team is really going to excel and really kind of be the identity of next year's squad?
Yeah, it's hard to say right now still with, in terms of making a prediction. My expectations are still fairly low for this team next year. I think you're going to see one more year of kind of a reload, getting these young underclassmen up to speed, and really trying to develop some of the talent for that next big push towards a conference title and an NCAA tournament berth. I'd be looking at one thing with the CCH too is just so competitive from top to bottom. I, with this Bemidji State team, I could see them finishing anywhere really third to seventh. I would say I don't see them falling below a Lake State or a Ferris really, but I don't see us really pushing for a conference championship either.
Does Augustana join the conference next year? Is that when they officially top in?
I think they play a series against every team in the
Correct.
conference, but they don't start playing a full slate of games or get counted in the standings at all.
Yeah, not until 2025, 2026 will be their first full season. These next 2 years are kind of a transition period where they play 2 games against each conference team, and basically that's just to help them with their scheduling. And it also helps the conference to kind of helps pairwise for the conference as a whole. Not having to play them twice.
Sure.
I think it's third to seventh is probably really accurate. I would like to say, can we be there at the end of the season? Maybe. It depends entirely on what happens to everybody else. There's so much that goes into a hockey season. Can we stay more healthy than we stayed this year? Because I think that was a big part of why we kind of fell off. But I think you're right. This team doesn't necessarily look like a lot of our better players are still going to be underclassmen in terms of overall talent. And that's typically not how you sustain success all year long. You'll see a couple weekends where they'll really shock you and you'll be like, wow, we just took 5 points from Michigan Tech at home, or something like that. And then, the next weekend it'll be a game against, or 2 games against Lake State, and they'll drop 4 points. And it's going to be a little bit more inconsistency, I'm sure, but I think we have the pieces in place, like you said, to kind of rebuild, retool, and make that once every 4 to 5 years run towards the NCAA tournament that we've kind of been making lately.
So taking as we kind of talk about how everything is unfolding as we get to next year's team and the conference changing a little bit. I mean, just how is, because Augustana is coming in, and I'm losing my train of thought here on this question, but I guess with everything changing and with St. Thomas just getting that infrastructure and trying to build that, what do you see, Lucas, as the future of the CCHA with those 2 new teams? And of course, with Mankato potentially going through a transition, of course, as we talked about before, it's a wait and see period. Tech always strong. And of course, Bemidji State in the middle of things. What is the future of the CCHA look like, just kind of from a 30,000 foot perspective?
Yeah, I mean, you got to love the commitment every program in the CCHA is showing to college hockey. There's no Miamis out there, that are kind of hesitant to put in the resources to their hockey programs. Augustana is building a beautiful new rink. St. Thomas is going to build a great new rink as well. Northern Michigan's going through a whole bunch of renovations right now at the Berry Event Center. That rink's going to look a lot better next year. And like you said, yeah, Michigan Tech's always a strong program. State Mankato has tremendous support in the community. You can't expect them to be down very long. Yeah, I mean, just from top to bottom, there's not really a weak team in this conference.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. I think that the CCHA can kind of get on the, I don't know if we'll have the national powerhouses as consistently as the Hockey East might have with like some of the Boston universities and teams that they put at the top of their conference, but that seems to be kind of where the conference is leaning, where the NCHC and the Big Ten are kind of right now on top of college hockey, at least with the landscape currently looking the way it does with all the transferring that's helping the Big Ten and just overall general talent committing to the NCHC. And then, there's kind of a slot right behind with the ECAC. That's kind of where we're at right now. And I think that the CCHA could take an extra leap up because they have more resources. A lot of those Ivy League schools, they just don't allow 5th-year players at those programs, some of them at least, because they don't have master's programs, or they don't allow those players to play athletics or something like that.
And so, as we've talked about the conference overall, now let's go back towards Bemidji State, Lucas. This year, just talk about what it's been like for you at Beaver Territory and what you've noticed with your page, and how is this hockey season and maybe just overall this athletic season throughout Bemidji State? How has this been for your page, and how have you kind of seen things transpire over the last year?
Yeah, I mean, it's been great. I mean, growth for my account and my website and everything has been extremely good, doubling in size, I would say, from this time a year ago at least. And yeah, it's just been great, talking to all these fellow Bemidji State fans, whether it's about hockey or any other sport. When the football team was making a run, it was great to see the fan support there. Same with the soccer team. So, it's been really fun. And yeah, I've been seeing a lot of good things coming from the Bemidji State athletics community.
Yeah, that it's been fantastic this year. I mean, we've been talking about this the first year that we've done this podcast, and being at this stage of the season, like just being at the place that we're at with the fan interaction that we've had is something. I mean, it's not, we're not up there with an NHL, TNT type interaction, but like for what we expected, it's miles beyond, I think, what we expected starting it in August. So it's been pretty fun, and I'm looking forward to building stronger brands as we move forward.
Well, and I think that's been the part is we've had this podcast, and then of course, Lucas, you've had your page, and it's just showing that there's this community of Bemidji State fans out there, people who do care, because Bemidji it's a smaller community compared to St. Cloud and Mankato, and of course the Moorheads and the U of M's and all that, UMDs. And people a lot of times, they'll go back to wherever they came from. They'll go back to the cities. They'll go back to their hometowns. They'll go back to wherever. They don't typically stay in Bemidji. So to have this community of people where you can find on social media, and that's really what we want to do, is we want to find all the Beaver fans out there, because there are a good amount of them who do care about the program and want to give them an avenue to be able to follow the team and to be able to get to have people talk about it and get excited when they do some good things, because overall it's been a pretty successful year for Bemidji State athletics.
Yeah, I mean, we had two teams in the NCAA tournament. We had the basketball team on the cusp. The men's basketball team was right there. That had to have been, it would have been a program record, I'm sure, having three teams at the same time in the NCAA tournament. I'm sure having two teams in the same year go to the NCAA tournament is probably a record. But just overall, as the program grows, I hope that the success that some of these programs kind of breed success for the other struggling programs, like maybe baseball can get up and triple or quadruple their win total, and maybe not even be a powerhouse, but have something successful to look forward to every year.
And so, Lucas, with your page with Beaver Territory, where can people check that out? Where can people follow you on social media? And what's just the future of Beaver Territory? What do you hope that page becomes?
Yeah, so with Beaver Territory, I'm planning on, for now staying the course and just kind of providing as much information regarding the hockey programs as I can, keeping track of all the recruiting out there, writing series previews each weekend. This off season, I plan on doing a couple of articles. I plan on getting a way too early line projections article out there sometime in the next week or so. When the schedule comes out, you'll see my rankings of road trips to go on. Trying to keep it really fun this off season before I delve right back into the more serious articles and when the season starts up again in October. That's all on beaverterritory.com. On Twitter, you can follow me at Beav Territory, BEAV. And I also have a Facebook page for Beaver Territory as well.
And it's been really fun getting to see not just the Bemidji State fans who've interacted with us and with your page, Lucas, but to see college hockey fans more generally come around and to get to kind of build that camaraderie in that community. What have you noticed with that, and how fun has that been?
Yeah, it's been great interacting, with the Northern Michigan fans out there, the Michigan Tech fans, just the conference in general. A lot of good, banter back and forth, or, even if people, find news out about each other's programs, it's always nice to be able to share that with the other fans out there. So it's been really fun just seeing how many college hockey fans are out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been getting followed by like Northern or Nebraska Omaha fan pages and stuff. I'm like, what on earth? How did he, find me out of everything? And Ohio State fans, you tag me on Twitter when Ohio State fans are finding my TikToks. I'm like, what the hell? But kind of zeroing back in on the team, I wanted to ask you what your thoughts are. Who's a player that's already on the team that you kind of want to make a step, and who's a player, obviously, I'm going to say except Eric Polkamp, that you're excited to see come in, because obviously we're all excited to see Eric step on the ice, but somebody that you're seeing come in and provide an impact as a freshman next year.
Yeah, for guys on the roster right now, I think you kind of have to look at that junior class. I mean, you've got Yuri Vyson, who played a top six role last year and played very well, having to step into a center role that he's not all too familiar with. I expect to see, growth from him again. Alexander Lundvin ended up third on the team in goals with 9, and also top shot percentage on the team, and also topped in plus minus at a +7. I think he's going to step into a role in the top 6, probably on that second line. And then you got the other 2 freshmen that aren't Leighton Road, the other 2 forward freshmen, both Kirkland Irie and Adam Fleming. Adam Fleming had 5 goals last year. Playing alongside Bison and Road. It'd be nice to see him step that production up next year and really solidify himself as a top 6 player as well. For players coming in, the forward group is they're good. I mean, you got Noah Quinn coming in from the BCHL. He played center for the Cranbrook Bucks. He was their leading scorer, leading scorer. He'll step in and play probably a third or fourth line center, I would say, as a freshman. Reese Chiddington, he played in the OJHL. Ended up with, I think, 94 points in 54 games. Just went on an absolute tear where he had, I think, a 20-something game point streak and a 12-game goal streak. It was just insane, some of the numbers he was putting up there at the end of the season. The OJHL is kind of a lower junior league, but just watching them play, you can tell that there's some definite, offensive talent, and he'll be a fun player to watch. I'm not sure exactly what his role will be next year, but in the next couple of years, you should see him putting up some good numbers.
Yeah, I think Kirkland Irie is a guy that I've had pinned in the back of my mind. I think he played some meaningful minutes. He had a smaller role for the team this year, but I liked him whenever he did get on the ice, and I think I have him pinned as kind of a forward to keep my eye on. And then basically everybody that was a freshman in that defensive group is what I was going to say. Mitch Wolf, Logan Atchison, and then Patrick Sotosari as well. Those 3 especially, how they can take the next step and kind of, like you said, step into those roles that those seniors that swallowed so many minutes, and see how they can do.
Yeah, and Sotosari is a good one to look at too. I mean, he was only eligible to play, I believe, half the season last year, but ended up as a leading scorer among those 4 freshman defensemen. Older guy, I think he's already 21 and will be 22 when the season starts. I have to double check his birthday, but he's a fairly old sophomore, or going into a sophomore year.
Taking the Adam Brady route.
Yeah, exactly. And 2 guys I forgot to mention too are the 2 European fresh forwards. We have Liam Engstrom coming in. He's a Swedish player. He played in the Swedish junior leagues this year, where he had, I think, 21 goals. And then also Casper Magnusson, who is a Norwegian, but also played in Sweden last year, where he had, I think, 17 goals and 13 assists, playing in that Swedish junior league. So, two freshmen that I don't know a whole lot about. I watched a couple of clips of both of them. Liam Engstrom is undersized, but just fast. I mean, just hustle, pure hustle, pure speed. Not a physical guy by any means, but is going to create some problems for opposing teams just with this speed alone.
Remind me a little bit of like a Brendan Harris or a Jerry Fitzgerald, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of what he reminded me of.
All right, guys, have a couple more minutes left on this podcast. Ian, Lucas, anything else you guys want to get out there about Bemidji State hockey? Otherwise, I think we can call it a podcast.
I don't know that I have anything on my end. I got all my questions out of the way and all my comments.
Yeah, I think we touched on everything I wanted to really talk about. So I appreciate you both having me on.
Appreciate having Lucas on the podcast as well. Again, check him out with Beaver Territory and all the great work he does keeping Bemidji State and college hockey fans informed on everything. A lot of great work, Lucas. It's been really fun having you on the podcast a few different times this season. We look forward to chatting with you all throughout the summer and then having you back on the podcast when fall rolls around and we get to talking about Bemidji State hockey again in 2023.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
So this has been the Beaver Banter Podcast. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. See you guys next time.